You finally understand most of what someone else says to you in another language, but you still walk away somehow thinking, I'm not fluent yet. You've been trained to ignore your progress. Let's fix that. So, in this video, we're breaking down the 3 fluency myths that make real progress invisible. Because if you watched the last video, we talked about why fluency can be such a struggle. So, by the end of this one, you're going to know how to make your progress actually count, your effort actually count when you're practicing, studying, reviewing, using the languages that you're learning. Let's hop into it. Let me help you with that. All right, so myth number 1, fluency means sounding like a native speaker. You might hear yourself thinking this. You might have heard many other people say this to you. Like, I'm going to feel fluent when I sound like a native speaker. As soon as I sound like you can't tell if I'm from that country or not, that's when I know I've made it. It sounds reasonable, right? Until you remember what fluency is for. Fluency is for connection and for clarity, for understanding, for getting information, for sharing information. It's not for an audition. We're not out here trying to perform. I mean, unless you literally are acting or singing in those languages. And a key thing here is accent. A lot of us tend to feel really self-conscious about our accents and, can you tell that this isn't my native language? I don't want you to be able to know. I want to go incognito. Well, first off, some of us can't. Let's be real. But that's not the point. The point isn't for us to blend in. The point is for us to be ourselves, to learn another language, to learn another culture, to be able to communicate or understand that language. So striving to have an accent that sounds like a native speaker is only helpful to an extent when you are trying to improve your pronunciation so that you're understood. The goal is to be understood and to understand. So you can keep your accent and you can still be easy to understand. And here's how I know, because there are tons of videos that I've seen on my page on many platforms where someone is speaking Spanish or speaking Japanese, but they're speaking it with, in my case as a native English speaker from America, with an American accent, a very thick American accent, or in Japanese, I've even seen like a Southern accent. And sometimes we can still fully understand the person. We might be giggling and then we might try it ourselves. But it's like, and I don't mean people who can't shift their accent. I mean people who are actively changing their accent to sound even more, again, in this case, more American, but in the language. So saying pero instead of pero in Espanol, in Spanish, like saying konbini instead of konbini, like in Japanese. So being able to shift that accent, but we still understand. And think about the people who speak your native language. They're not native speakers, but you still understand them. And that same thing applies for when we're speaking another language. So you can keep your accent, you can still be easy to understand. The skill that you actually need is control over simple phrases, being able to make sentences, understand sentences when they're said in context, actually talk versus how a textbook speaks. Clear stress in sentences and a steady pace so that your listener can follow you, is not bored. And if we're talking about writing, same process, being able to understand text talk versus an essay versus a novel. And especially if it's languages like French, where novel writing has its own rules and grammar structures that is just specific to that language and that culture, right? There's a lot of things that we can do to understand and be understood without being native level. And even that is a myth, because native level we assume is like C2, when in reality the average person probably is at a B2, and C2 is more academic focus. Prove me wrong in the comments if you disagree, right? So here's what I want you to do in your next sort of output session, whether you're speaking or you're writing. I want you to run 3 quick check-ins after a conversation. Again, whether you're talking out loud or you're texting someone. First, I want you to ask yourself, did that person understand me on the first try most of the time? Yes or no? And I said most of the time, you can gauge what most is for you. The second one is, when that person didn't understand me, could I repair it quickly? Could I explain myself, explain my thinking? Maybe I had to actually think about it first, but could I explain that with simpler words or a short phrase or in a different way? Hint, if not, then that's a skill that you're going to practice. And 3, did the conversation keep moving? It's okay to freeze here and there, but did you just stop the conversation and say, you know what, I'm just going to go back to my native language. I give up. We'll try again tomorrow, right? So if those answers are yes, that 1, they did understand me for the most part. 2, when they didn't understand me, I repaired it. I was able to explain myself to some degree. And then 3, the conversation kept moving. If you can say yes to those 3 questions, You're already doing what fluent speakers do every day. You're already doing it. You've made it. Check. Mark it off. But I get it, because maybe you're hearing this and you're thinking to yourself, well, people judge accents all the time. Well, some people also judge them in your native language, right? What matters is that you can be understood. And I know it's easier said than done. Like, we can say that to ourselves from the top of a rooftop, and it still doesn't matter if we don't believe it, if we don't live it, if we don't experience it in our life. But you have to remind yourself that the goal is to be understood and to understand. Keep the interaction going if it's a conversation. Keep reading if it's about reading. Keep watching the movie. Replay that section if you have to. Whatever it takes to keep doing the things that you want to do in the languages that you're learning. Fluency is through action, not through promises. Now, on the second myth that I want you to toss out into the garbage, that fluent means never making mistakes. I'm not going to ask who told you that, because it was probably somebody in school at some point who told you you made a mistake, you failed, and you're a horrible person because of that, or gave you that impression at some point. Maybe it was teachers, maybe it was parents. I'm not going to judge. But what I am going to tell you is that that's a myth. It's wrong, because think about how many mistakes that you make in your native language when talking, when communicating, when writing something down, when texting a friend, when reading something and going, wait a second, what did I just read? Watching a movie, or my one, listening to music and not understanding the lyrics, and you make up your own lyrics. Like, I grew up on the era of misheard lyric videos, and they were quickly the most popular thing that I have seen, because the only way to really look up lyrics was online, that someone, typed up. Maybe they had the booklet in the CD and then they gave you the lyrics. Nowadays, you can just get them very quickly. And if you have something like Apple Music or Spotify, the lyrics are right there in 3 days. But before that, there was misheard lyrics. And how many times are you like, yep, they definitely said olive juice instead of I love you in that song, and you believed it with your entire chest. And so the same thing with the languages that we're learning. Like, this is where perfectionism is sneaking back in, because we feel like we have to never make mistakes in the languages that we're learning. When we do that in our native languages, we pause mid-sentence to fix a verb, or to literally question, how do I conjugate this one? Because I've never actually said it in this tense before in my entire life. Or how do I say this word out loud? Because I've only read it in a book and I've never heard anybody say it. We rewrite a message 3 times. We're like, should I say it this way? No, actually, let me change it and write it this way. What punctuation should I? Maybe I'm the overthinker, and maybe you actually never do this, which congratulations. But, even like voice notes, we say something to a friend and then we delete the voice note because one word felt really wrong. You said it so many times that it lost meaning, and you're like, I don't even know what I was talking about. Like, I don't even know what I was saying, right? Mistakes are not a verdict. They're not a and obviously we're talking about mistakes in language learning, and a mistake when you say something, they are not like a sign that you are not fluent. It just happens. They're a sign that you're using the language in real time, in reality. Because, again, I'm going to keep saying this throughout the video. I want you to literally think about it. Think about it right now. When was the last time, probably today, probably yesterday, that you made a mistake in your native language? What was the mistake that you made? Think about it. It's not about, making yourself feel bad or guilty about it. It's literally saying, hey, you do this on a regular basis. It's fine. You're going to survive. Even if you're like me, and in Japanese, you tell your teacher that you have pink pantsu, which, if you know Japanese, that's telling her I have pink underwear instead of pink jeans like I was trying to do. Yeah, that was my very first year in Japanese, and I never forgot that pantsu is not pants. So even as native speakers, we restart sentences, we swap words, we ask for clarification. We're like, I've never heard of that word before. What is that? And then someone else has to explain it to you. I think about games like Taboo, if you've never heard of that game before. It's a card. It has one word on the top that you have to get the other person to guess, and it has all the words below it that you're not allowed to say. If it says writing, you're not allowed to say novel and book and story and author, but you have to get them to say the word on the top. And it's actually a really cool way to practice languages. So if you wanted to develop a game on that, and then 10%, asking for much. We make every version of it, but it's a useful skill. It's a skill that has to be developed. It's not something that we naturally are able to do. So we kind of recover. We say the thought again. We use fewer words. We use different words. We swap that unknown word for a short description. We give a story around it, an anecdote. We ask for the word that we need, and then we finish like, what is that thing called? Yes, that. And then we continue the conversation. We keep the message readable without rewriting it more than once. You just say, my handwriting is sloppy, and we move on to all my fellow sloppy handwriters or the people who, it takes a little bit of effort to make it nice and pretty. So give yourself the recovery test this week when it comes to this myth. I want you to, when you are using the languages that you're learning, ask yourself these 3 questions. 1, can you finish the thought after a stumble? Not avoid the stumble, but when it happens, can you finish your thought? Does it take you a long time? Doesn't matter. Can you finish the thought? Second one, can you keep a message clear without perfect grammar? Like, keep it dictionary form. Like, don't even conjugate it at all. Is it still understood? Perfect. You did it. You're fluent. Can you let one small error go and continue the conversation? It takes practice to do that. And actually, the way that I did this back in college with Japanese was I made mistakes on purpose. It's literally the strategy that I teach inside of the lab and with a lot of the people that I work with who, similar to me, struggle with making mistakes. I say make the mistake on purpose. Do it on purpose and then fix it. Show yourself that you can fix it. So if you can do those 3 things, again, finish the thought after a stumble, keep the message clear without perfect grammar, and let that one error go, the small error go, to continue the conversation, to continue the effort that you're doing. Again, it doesn't have to be output, doesn't have to be speaking, doesn't have to be writing. It's just however you're using it. But can you let that small error or mistake that you made go and continue the work that you're doing? If you can do those things, then you are building fluency faster than the person who waited for perfection, the person who waited for perfect sentences in silence, because you can't refine what you never say. You can't refine the skill that you don't actually build. So congratulations, you're building that skill. Now on to the third one. Fluency means understanding everything. Raise your hand if you're someone who told this to yourself, that in order for me to consider myself fluent, I have to understand everything that people say to me. And then think again with your native language. How many times have you entered into a conversation where you have no clue what people are talking about, right? If you're not a gamer and someone's talking about games and they say, oh, this is just a QTE, and you're like, what the hell is a QTE? It's a quick time event. Huh? If someone's talking about their favorite story or their least favorite story, and they're like, it's just a fade to black. You're like, what the hell is a fade to black? It's when they don't want you to know what happens next. They just fade the scene to black and they let you fill in the blanks, right? There's lots of topics we just don't know and we don't have the context for, or we don't have the vocabulary to express. So we use simpler words, we use descriptions. So in our native language, fluency doesn't mean understanding everything, but why do we put that pressure on ourselves when we're learning other languages? So you might think, if I miss a word, I'm not fluent. But that belief makes every session that you do, every study session, every practice session, every review session, feel like a failure. But the reality is the real progress, again, speaking, listening, reading, writing, includes the background noise that you're just listening to while you're doing other things. It includes slang that people use every day, different speeds of speaking and listening, different ways of writing about topics, casual, formal, informal. It includes unexpected topics, learning how to learn from reading, right? Learning how to understand through context what someone is saying and meaning, the same way that we learned these reading skills in our native language. These are skills. It took us years to develop these skills. Now, yes, it's a lot easier to develop them when you have them once, but we have to acknowledge that this is a skill. It's not an inherent thing that we're able to do. We understand how to read a story and, if we come across a word, especially in fantasy, let's say, for an example, in a fantasy story, they use words that they've literally made up. I love this part of writing. This author made up their own terminology for things. They help you to understand what it means through context, through descriptions, through definitions. And you understand it. That's a skill. And so it takes practice, and you need to give yourself the time to practice. How do I understand in other languages too, in that same way, right? So even if you miss a word in an audio, in a book, or you're skimming, you can still follow the point and get the gist of what's being said. Get your point across as well. We're not trying for perfection. Even us perfectionists need to tell ourselves it's not about being perfect. So here are 3 things that I want you to ask yourself when it comes to trying to understand everything. The first question is, could you follow the main idea in 2 to 3 key details? And yes, this is Teacher Bront'e coming out. Could you follow the main idea in 2 to 3 key details? Could you infer a missing word from context? So could you understand the word that you didn't understand, but through the context of how they were talking about it? So maybe you can't define it, but if someone were to ask you what it meant, you would say it's kind of like, like for example, if the story said bow tie, and you have no clue what a bow tie is. You might say it's kind of like when you get a present and then they put that thing on it and it's tied usually with two little loops. You don't know how to explain it elsewhere, but you gave the context for someone else to be able to understand it. Third one, could you ask one short clarifying question and stay in the flow? So if you don't understand, do you have almost like a bank of questions that you can ask yourself, ask the other person so that they can help you to understand, or so that you know exactly what you're looking for? Because again, this is something you can do on your own. If you're reading something or listening to something, what question can you ask yourself to help you understand? Like, well, what topic is she talking about? Okay, well, it looks like she's talking about cars. Great. What kind of car? Ask yourself these questions to dig deeper into it before you go to a dictionary. And by dictionary, I don't mean monolingual dictionary, so one language only. I mean like translator dictionaries where it's between two languages. So if you can do that, yes to those questions, you are functioning at a fluent level for that situation. And you can give yourself a pat on the back, celebrate it. Please write it down on that wins tracker. I know you downloaded already. It's free because the goal is comfort in motion. The goal is using the languages that you're learning. It's not about perfectly capturing every skill at 100% all the time, especially for those of us who are learning multiple languages, because we learn, we get to a place that we can use it, and then you have to maintain it, which not many people talk about. So here's what I want you to do right now. I want you to look back at the last 7 days of your studies. It can be literally the last 7 days. So the 7 days before this, it can be the last 7 days that you studied, maybe 2 months ago, those 7 days, whatever 7 days. I want you to just look at them, look back at it, and run this really quick audit. Actually, I have a more extensive audit. I'll try to include the details in the description, but here's the quick audit. 1, where did you get understood on the first try, even with an accent? That counts. I want you to write that down. Where possibly did you recover from a mistake and finish the thought anyway, edit, revise it? That counts too. Where did you follow the conversation even though you missed words? You didn't understand every individual word, but you understood the gist. That counts. What we're trying to do is add up the number of moments where your fluency has been shown to you, been proven to you, but you didn't believe it, right? You have been fluent in those moments all week. Again, even if it was a tiny moment. And we're going to build up those moments. The problem is that these myths have convinced you that you haven't actually made any progress. They've convinced you that those moments don't matter, and they do. So you don't need to sound like a native speaker. You don't need to avoid mistakes. Mistakes will happen. I always tell my students it's not about avoiding the mistake. It's about what you do when the mistake happens. You do not need to understand everything. You need to keep showing up, keep studying, keep practicing, keep reviewing, and using the languages that you're learning, using what you already know to help you understand the things that you don't know. So if you're ready to let go of at least one of the myths that I shared in this video, don't forget to like this video. Comment which of the myths you believed for the longest time. Maybe this was the moment where you realize, ooh, I do believe that. And you know what? We're going to fix that. And share what you're going to replace that myth with in the coming weeks. And finally, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next video, because in the next one, we're going to be talking about what fluency actually can look like in real life with some real context. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.